Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Phil Cambers. I'm the Commercial Director at TruStack. I'm really pleased to be joined this morning with a company who we provide some IT support for, and also who actually provide some legal support to TruStack. So it's a real showcase of an excellent relationship, and it's Muckle LLP. And I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Maddock, who heads up their employment team there. We've seen a lot of digital transformation and workforce transformation taking place over the last 18 months. And as this digital transformation and employment transformation is taking place, I think we're playing catch up to a degree. And we just wanted to run this session to try and just give you guys a bit of additional value-added education. So Chris, I'm going to pass it over to yourself, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Morning, everybody, from a very rainy Newcastle. My view of you guys this morning is a little white dot, so please bear with me if I'm not as interactive as I could be. I can't see your faces. So Phil's right. I think the world has changed beyond belief in the last 16 to 18 months, the world of work in particular. And I've got a sort of 20-30 minute slot to pose some questions, to think about some of the things that we're seeing. And I think all it will do is gather even more momentum over coming years. I think the genie is out of the bottle, really, in terms of world of work, workplaces, and how we all value that sort of work-life balance. And I think the next indicator, so beyond what I'm going to talk about today in terms of immediate things, is that some of you might have seen on BBC News or on the online channels yesterday, the area of 4-day working week is actually coming back up, with the trials that have gone on over several years now in places like Iceland and Denmark having seen to make real changes to society. So New Zealand, a number of the big accountancy firms are using New Zealand as a test bed for that type of provision. So you think you're just talking about workplace and things. Actually, I think the next debate that we're all going to have is about how long each week we all work for, and whether we can do that, and how you mix office-based workers and factory-based workers in that conundrum is going to be really, really difficult. So that's just a headline for what will be coming in the future. As Phil said, I'm the head of 10 employment lawyers at Muckle, and we've had, as you can imagine, a very busy period of time. The furlough questions, the reorganisation questions, are quiet for the moment, and we don't see any major reorganisations on the horizon. And what I thought would be helpful to do today was just to pull out from an article that I wrote, which I think Zoe will provide you all with a link to after this session, a number of questions that we're starting to be asked by clients to look at, to think about with them, and actually that we're thinking about for our own business. And if I can share what we're doing here as part of it to give some examples of that, I'll try and do that. And if there are any questions, I think so will interrupt me, and we'll just ask the questions as we go along. So I literally only have one slide, and it's just titled "What's Next?" And I think this comes from a fact that I drive my wife and my 2 daughters mad, because my answer to any question is usually another question. So why? Trying to understand the motivations, trying to understand what goes on is part of my day job. So you might be asking me to do something, but is that the right thing to do? Is that the approach that we need to do? And I guess the idea for the article, which these 5 questions are taken from, came from questions we are being asked by clients who've seen the press or who've talked to colleagues in other businesses and have felt they need to sort of follow the flock on hybrid working, blended working, work 2.0, whatever you call it. So we've been asked, do you have standard contracts for hybrid working? And the answer to that's a pretty easy one. We don't, because hybrid working, what comes next depends on the business that we're working with. And I think as the response to the pandemic has shown over a substantial period of months, most of us, our businesses have stayed together because of our cultures, because of the trust we've shown in people, and because of us making change very quickly and adapting and adopting working practices that probably in normal times we'd have trialed, we'd have run for several months, we'd have had queries about what they were doing. And in a large scale of things, they've been shown to work. Productivity for most of us is up. And I think it's about keeping that and keeping that going. That's important to us. So I thought, as I said, I'd concentrate on those 5 initial questions because they cover the 15 or so areas that the article goes into in a bit more detail. And I think it is for me about sitting down as a management team, sitting down as leaders of your businesses and thinking about what the future looks like for us, what we can use to our benefit. And a lot of people are using it as the way to reinvent what they do or to reinvigorate what they do and to look forward to probably the next biggest challenge, which is the environmental decarbonisation of society and what we will all be expected to do, and which is already being cascaded down for any of you that contract with government, from the fact that when they give out tenders now in future, they will be asking for your plans as to how you will help them decarbonise the UK economy. So thinking about the questions against that introduction, do you actually need to change your employment contracts? Do you actually need to change your approach to how the business is structured? I think what we're seeing for the majority of clients so far is that they say it's too soon to change our contracts, and that's the view we've taken here. We have a contractual provision. We're 150 people in a single central office in Newcastle. Today, I'm here. I'm probably one of 20 people that is here. The remainder are working from home. We've not changed the contracts to home working. We intend that when the office is able to reopen, and we think that's probably 19th of July, given what Boris said last night, that we will be able to open without the current levels of restriction. But whether we do so or not as a management team still is up for debate. In our own mind, it's the 6th of September. That all works, but afterwards, although we will, and we always had, in all honesty, the flexibility for people to work from wherever they wanted, we will be effectively probably not changing our contracts. The place of work, the main location will be here. If your manager or your business need is for you to be here, that's the expectation. But we give you the flexibility to work from elsewhere for a period of time each week. And in our case, that's 2 working days or 40% of your normal working time. And it's up to you how you deal with that. And I think that's important for some of the questions that come later on in terms of thinking about what is it? Is it a forced home working aspect of the work for part of the time or not? If so, that engenders certain duties. If it is just giving the employees the tools and the flexibility that they need to choose where they work during any given working week, then that's slightly different. There's a really good Northeast-based psychologist called Rob Baker, who's got a business called Tailored Thinking, and he's written some books about what we see as the next stage of the evolution of work in terms of workers, and it's this notion called job crafting. So where individuals work with their employer to actually design their working day, design what the work they do, design what their career path and strategies are. And I think we're seeing more of that starting to happen as a sort of personalized aspect to quite a lot of the things we're doing. And I think thinking about how culturally you manage that change is important. I think the other thing that we're also seeing thought processes start on is how you manage those employees where there is flex, and how they are viewed by the employees where there is no flex. So who have to be on a production line, who have to be at work and can't choose to work from home. I think we move from that stage currently where we've all been in this together, we've all got through it together, into recognizing and how you manage on a HR level the different views that those groups might have and the resentments that might over time build up as we move forward into things. What I said about understanding how you construct what your working environment looks like post-pandemic is important. So for me, there's a key difference between a home worker who either works all or part-time at home and somebody who has the option or the choice to choose where they work from. And we are seeing some clients looking at that second question, thinking about this under a traditional sort of flexible working policy and asking people to request change and make permanent changes to their contract. I think that works potentially around people who are returning from maternity leave or who need that certainty of to number of hours. But actually, if you're going to use that process, it's really quite cumbersome and potentially opens you up to a number of potential discrimination arguments if you give to one group and not to another. You need to be very careful about using a flexible working process to manage the change that you're likely to do. It might be far better to adopt a structure like the one we've implemented here, where effectively the flex is inherent within the system, and unless somebody feels they need to apply to work from home and have that change implemented in their contract as a permanent change, to just deal with it as management discussions and deal with it on a trial and error basis. I was at a session a couple of weeks ago with a number of the HR directors for big Newcastle-based businesses, many of whom have multiple retail operations around the country, and they were saying, actually, we're not making changes yet. We're trialing things. We're working with our staff to give things a go and see if they work. If they don't, we'll put them right. If they do work, we might embed them. But they just think it's too soon to make the changes that are needed. So just think about it. Probably overly, if you're looking at policy and other things to drive change, I think that probably is slightly the wrong approach for a moment. I think it should be about management capability and management structure. And that comes down then into how you manage people, and a lot of employment law issues pre-pandemic, but actually the pandemic has just brought that home to us. A lot of the employment things that we deal with, actually, if you've got strong and capable management systems and strong and capable and well-trained managers in place, they actually take a lot of the stress and hassle out of dealing with a number of issues. If they're consistent, they've got clarity, and they can give their employees clarity that you're 9/10 of the way there. So how you manage remote working and health and safety issues, I think, is a question that Zoe had in advance of the session. And I think the question was about, do you need to provide an ergonomic, effectively a second workplace for people if they work from home? For me, it's that key thing. What are you asking people to do? So if you're giving people the flexibility to work remotely and they choose when and how, but actually, if they want to come to the office, there is a desk for them, they have multiple monitors, they have an office chair, then and that is their place of work, then working away from the office becomes a choice. If working away from the office doesn't become a choice and is imposed, my view is that Health and Safety at Work Act says you must provide a safe place and safe system of work. If you are saying that your workplace will be a dual workplace, it will be home and in the office, you probably will be expected by the health and safety executive to replicate what you have here. So that might be an ergonomic chair, it might be other provisions. But if it is that you can flex away from your workplace when it suits you to do so, I think, and it's untried, and this is just a personal view, that there is a hybridized approach to that. So again, if I think of us, we've always had laptops, we have a docking station, we have 2 extra monitors in the office, but actually I have a riser that Muckle have provided. I have had support with a work chair for my home, and I have a keyboard and I have a mouse that I can plug in. So I can, if I want to work from home, I don't have the extra screens, but I have everything else I need to work safely. And a lot of it is about that provision. It's about reminding people about display screen audits and making sure that they've they understand the postural issues, training on things like taking time away from the screen and moving. All those things will, I think, be needed. And we've been through this sort of honeymoon period with the health and safety executive, and probably also with the information commissioner's office that I'll come on to in a second, where thinking about what you will need longer term and the support you give people is an important consideration. What I would say is that some businesses, and I can sort of understand it as we went into the pandemic, literally were not set up to do this. They scrummaged around for laptops, and they got people set up to work remotely, and some of them just gave a budget to people, a couple £100 to go and set themselves up with a home office. That's not enough to me. The health and safety obligations you have aren't delegable as an employer. You can't just get around it by saying, well, I gave you £200 to go and buy an office chair. Did you not go and buy an office chair? You've got to manage it proactively, and you've got to think about if this is a tenet of your business, so you will have less desks than there are people that work in the organization. So it forces people into that world of work that way. Then I think you need to think about how actively you will start to manage things going forward. The other factor, which also comes from management by in line managers, about how you manage performance remotely. Actually, in terms of practical questions, we've not had a great deal of questions about people who've been viewed not to be doing what's needed from home or swinging the lead, which I think would have been real concerns from businesses when we first went into lockdown. As I said earlier, I think productivity in a lot of businesses has actually substantially improved. The daily commute becomes more working time, or people have that capability to work a bit more flexibly and come back to things. So we've not seen it as an issue. We have, though, started to see, and particularly lawyers talk about it, about employers that are looking to more actively manage performance remotely. There are anecdotes of call center environments where people have been asked to work for part of the day with the camera on, or the camera has been enabled on a laptop to be able to see who's actually there and doing the work. And that remote monitoring and its intrusivity into the home life of people needs to really be actively managed. If you're thinking about doing anything like that, you need to look at the Information Commissioner's offices guidance on that type of remote working, and you're going to have to do some form of audit trail to show how you balance the intrusion on people's private lives with the protections that you need for your organization. And I think it's highly unlikely that in the vast majority of circumstances, you'll be able to balance what you require against the intrusion that comes with it. So if you're thinking about that, or somebody's trying to sell you that sort of package, I would think very carefully about adopting that. And I'd take some advice from your advisors and talk it through with them as to what you're doing and what benefits it would have. I also think that we've seen it increasingly with employment cases, the BrewDog issues, the issues around harassment within Tom Kitchen's restaurants and things like that, where social media campaigns and actually current or former staff raise issues in social media and on other platforms have become an increasing way to manage issues. And I think we will see if there is surveillance or employees are being subject to substantial checks, then I think that is the sort of area where that sort of issue is likely to become something that publicity and the way in which an employer is viewed in the wider society needs to be thought about. You also, though, have the ability and you need to, of course, manage data. And I think what we've also seen with the rise of home working is that there are still organizations that don't always own all the kit that their employees use to do the work for them. So that might be a mobile phone, it might be a laptop. We used to call them bring your own device policies or issues. and the advice in terms of those remains the same. If you need to get information, or you need to actually forensically look at what an employee's been up to if they go and join a competitor, or you're worried about confidential information having not been used in the way it should be, you're always in a far better position if it's your kit. So you want to be able to take it back. You don't want to have to rely on legal letters to try and understand whether somebody has deleted information or what they've done with it from their own laptop or their own mobile phone. So thinking about that when you're kitting people out is important, but also thinking about what would happen if there was a data breach, if there was any need to go to court and actually try and get confidential information back. As I said, the ICO, that we have had this honeymoon period. I'm not aware of any substantial data breach issues that have come out of the pandemic with people doing stuff or working from home. A number of call center environments have shown that actually call centers which manage financial and other data have been able to operate securely, and they've changed their operating models in order to do so. And I think for me, it's always about control. I know a number of you that work with TruStack will be in an IT background, but judges will always say that employers overstate the confidentiality of data. They will always say they take too wide a view of what's confidential and what's not. So trade secrets are clearly confidential. After that, you've got to show why something is confidential. And being able to show the systems in which it's kept, the access that it's had, the security levels that there are around printing it out, around sharing it, around interrogating the information, and the layers that need to be gone through are the sort of thing, if we're ever dealing with confidential information breaches by employees, that judges are all over, to be honest. So thinking about that, thinking about how you manage that data, thinking about how you deal with destruction of paper records and whether anybody should be keeping paper records at home is an important factor. So there are, and I think Phil sort of talked about it at the beginning, there is an absolute need to just think about that as part of the planning for what everybody does, going through this sort of new working environment, and that capability to manage a piece of equipment remotely, to be able to switch it off or to immobilize it. It's more important now than ever, I think, given where we are. So I think they were the things I wanted to talk about. Just slightly aware I've talked for about 25 minutes. Zoe, Phil, did you have any questions?
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
So I think you have pretty much covered all the questions today. There was that question from Catherine at VoiceCentric about the ergonomic setup of staff's home workplaces and where does the responsibility lie with the employer. I think you covered that, unless you want to touch on anything else on that question.
No, I think, as I said, I think for me it becomes about definition. It's highly likely that health and safety executive will look at it in more detail as we start to plan and as they start to see how many people drift back to work, I think. I also think insurers will start to force actions on employers, because there is, personal injury lawyers are looking at probably postural and other claims and bad back claims that will come from us all sitting at kitchen tables for several months, and trying to do that linkage. So I think there is a worry that longer term it becomes a claims factory issue from certain lawyers. So for me, think about the reasons that people are going to be working from home. Actually, the costs of providing those items and potentially having provisions in your contract that allow you to take them back when somebody leaves, or to charge for them if somebody leaves and they don't give them back, I think will increasingly be common. They're quite common in home worker amendments to contracts, and even some of those contracts allow for the employer to go around and just examine the workplace just to make sure it's in a form that they're happy to say is a safe place of work. I think those things will grow, but I think for me it comes back to that notion about what is it we are requiring of those people as our employees. If it is, I'm giving you the flexibility to choose how and where you work, and I give you the equipment to allow you, if you're not sat at your desk in the office, to do that work as well as possible. That to me is very different from somebody who will purely work from home or doesn't have a desk, so they have to work from home for a large part of their working week.
I think there's, just to add to that, there's always been an intrinsic link between employing someone and their IT. But I think now the link between IT and employment is even more, I wouldn't say complicated, but there's a lot more considerations to make, simply because the traditional workplace doesn't really exist anymore. And there's, like Chris said, there's a lot of considerations. There's a lot of IT considerations around security that you didn't need to consider perhaps before. So I think the landscape has changed. Chris, what would be the call to action, and if would people just reach out to you directly if they wanted more information?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn. I also have a Twitter account, which is at Maddock Muckle. And we're constantly doing training. We're constantly trying to think of the next step. Phil's right. IT, I think it's shown that in all of our lives, the IT has become fundamental to things working. I think a lot of us were worried that the broadband networks just wouldn't cope with us all working from home. They clearly have. I think personally that's a substantial area where we're all gonna have to put focus in the future, because the levels of adoption, the levels of, I think Phil just said it, the levels of risk that you face, and we have to take cybersecurity provisions out to get certain work for banks and other people that we work for. We have to do encryption services to work for them. I think we've also spent a lot of time training up all of our people in terms of, especially when you're working from home, those sort of Trojan horse type emails that you get that look like they're from a colleague or look like they're from a client asking you to do something, recognizing that and dealing with stuff. It's a massive area, and it probably is one of the biggest potential single points of weakness for organizations, and we're just seeing it with all the ransomware and stuff in the States. I think for me it's a key area, and empowering the employees to help you defend the place is equally as important as making sure they got the right desk and chair for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions, you've got our details at TruStack on the IT side of things, and of course, Chris has shouted out his Twitter feed there. So yeah, we'll call this a close, and we'll catch you all soon for the next session, which will be around mental health, and that's with a company that we work with called Insight Healthcare, and it's talking about burnout. So that'll be the next thing. And again, it's all kind of linked to IT. The IT's made us more productive, but there is a flip side of that. So that'll be next Tuesday, and we'll pre-record that too. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Bye.